Beside the mayor of the airways, we continue our conversation with Claudia. And Claudia is a mother who is reconciled with her son that she gave up for adoption. And they were reconciled 18 years ago. He just turned 30. Matter of fact, today, which is sort of ironic, today is his birthday, right, Claudia?
Yes, it is. And so I would be remiss if I did not say happy 30th birthday to my son, Max.
Max. Now, did you name him Max, or was...
No, he has another legal name. I named him Max. That is his name on his original birth certificate, which is still sealed by the state of Massachusetts, and we cannot have, but it's there. And he does have another name, which I do not release publicly because that's not my story. That's his story.
What do you mean? What do you mean he can't have his birth certificate? What the hell is that all about?
Well, that is one of those major issues in adoption, and basically every adoptee in this country, when they are adopted, their original birth certificate is actually sealed, and this happens when the legal act of the adoption is finalized, and the states all issue what is called the amended birth certificate.
Yeah.
And basically they give the child a new legal birth certificate and replace the biological parents' names on it with the adoptive parents' names. And the original birth certificate is sealed. And unfortunately, it works for what it needs to work for, which is basically, the best way I can explain it is like a title of a car. It's the birth certificate is then used to show parentage. You can take to school and register your child for school and Little League and, does all that good stuff. But unfortunately, when an adoptee becomes an adult and they say, hey, I'd like to know, I'd like to have my legal documentation because everybody else in the world is allowed to have it, or I would like to know who gave birth to me, the majority of states in this country still have old laws on the books, and it is sealed. You cannot. New York is still sealed. You cannot get your birth certificate if you are adopted. Massachusetts, where my son is born, was sealed. They revised the law in 2007, and unfortunately at that point in time, at the last minute, they did open up some birth certificates. So it was previous to if you were born before 1974 or born after the law goes into effect in 2007, you can get your original birth certificate. But from 74 to 2007, adoptees born in that time frame cannot have their birth certificates. And my son was born in 87. So we can walk into the Office of Vital Statistics hand in hand and say, hey, can we have that piece of paper with our names on it? And we cannot have it.
Wow. It's just not right.
So, yeah, it's a crazy thing, and there's basically there's movement almost all over the country at this point in time. The majority of states do have a group working to try to change the laws. Unfortunately, adoption law in general is a state issue, and so this battle with 50 different state legislators has to happen 50 different times in 50 different states. We're not 50 anymore because there has been some slow progress made in the last couple of decades, but not nearly as quick or as necessary. And it's ridiculous because at this point in time, the DNA is just going, whatever, we don't need your laws. We can find our families anyway.
What's the holdup? So the argument is the primary argument I understand is that they believe the natural parents want anonymity. Is that the argument against it?
Well, it's very amusing. That is the argument that the legislators use. That is the argument that often the lawyers use because a lot of the pushback comes from the attorneys. Like in New York, that's the only opposition is the Bar Association and the surrogate court judges that ever testify against opening records in New York. Yes, they say, oh no, we must protect the birth parents because we told them that it would be confidential and it's not fair to allow the adoptee to now go back and, knock on their door or something. And so it's an absolutely ridiculous process because, honestly, research has been done. There has never been, because if there was, it would be raised like a red flag. There has never been one relinquishment consent form that has showed up that legally states that the mother who signed this document was promised confidentiality for her lifetime. And there's a big difference between lifelong anonymity and a confidential process. Confidentiality means the attorney's not going to put a billboard up and say, like, hey, so-and-so got knocked up and gave birth. It means he's not going to, sit there and talk at the bar about it. It means, people have a certain, amount of privacy. It doesn't mean that for the rest of one's life, one can be held in secret and given anonymity by the government. It's not the witness protection program. But that's how they use it. So it's kind of funny because the documents that have been produced and that have been researched clearly show that any anonymity that was given on behalf of the adoptive parents so that the birth mother could not interfere with the adoptee's life going forward. It had nothing to do with protecting her, but now they use birth parents as a reason to not allow these records to be opened. And it's going back to fear. People are afraid of what the unknown is, and it's just it's a ridiculous thing because, just because a person is adopted does not mean that they are going to become a stalker. And, most adoptees are aware of the fact that this is a very, very sensitive issue, and they're going to go into a search and they're going to go into initial contact very, very carefully and with, the most sensitivity that anybody could. And yet, we have the governments that are basically infantizing adult citizens for their lifetimes based on choices and decisions that were not made by them, and it's holding them under contract for something that they had no agreement on, that they had no part of. So it's a crazy unfair process, and it's just crazy because we have the research from the states that have opened. I mean, Oregon has been open for over 20 years. And what happens when adoptees get access to their original birth certificates?
What?
They get access to their original birth certificates. That's about it. And nobody goes jumping off of bridges, and, mothers don't go screaming through the streets because their adult children have dared to contact them. If people want to find each other, fine. I mean, it's just crazy because, there's no law that says strangers can't contact each other.
All right,
if
now
I want to send you a piece of mail, I can send you a piece of mail.
You're damn right. Now, I wanted to let you know that Beverly is in here, and Beverly is our concierge of the airwaves. And she also is the mother of 3 handsome, totally grown-up men. How old are your children?
Oh, you really want to know? They're in their 60s. Okay.
All 3 of them?
Yeah. No, one is in his 50s. Claudia, you are articulating the rules of today. When you were pregnant, 9 months is the emotional time. Did you have anybody to support you, or were you ostracized in some way? I mean, you seem like you were alone. Nobody guided you.
Yeah, I would definitely say yes. That is, when I was pregnant with my son, I knew I was pregnant early on, and I actually have trouble understanding my own actions at that time, but the best I can even describe it is that I was the proverbial deer in the headlights, where I just froze, and I literally did nothing. I told no one, not even my best friend, and I just hid my pregnancy for some odd unknown reason, which I still can't really quite explain, and eventually I was outed by a family friend and coworker. Let's put it that way.
Outed
when I was I was probably close to 6 months pregnant at that
What do you
point.
mean? What do you mean outed? What do you mean by outed?
Well, I worked with this very tiny Colombian woman with a very strong accent. She was a little bird-like woman, and I worked with her. And
a little birdie, huh? A little birdie.
And she said to me, Claudia, you are pregnant. And she had tried to confront me on my pregnancy the month before, and I had denied it up and down. No, I'm not. I again, don't know why. I cannot explain these things. It's just absolute sure panic. But then a month later, I could not convince her. And her words to me were, Claudia, what are you doing? You are pregnant. A baby will ruin your life. What are you going to do? And at that point,
now what a horrible thing to say.
Yeah,
it is.
What a horrible people curse with their words. It is simply Amazing. The stupidity and this control bullshit crap.
Well, she was a woman who was probably one of very early feminists who had had a very tough existence and was a very strong believer in education in order for a woman to take care of herself. And I had not completed my education, and therefore to her, having a child before your education was setting me up for a bad thing. And I don't mean to defend her in any which way, but, that was her thought process.
No, well, the thing is, it wasn't malicious. And this is why we need to forgive. We all need to be forgiven because we're all guilty of letting our emotions rule us at times. She had her pocket, and she thought because she was in this pocket, and she thought because she wanted you altruistically to be free and emancipated, that she had the right to somehow tell you this was going to ruin your life. How many lives have been ruined by pregnancies and how many lives have been made by pregnancies? How many people were planned on being born? People copulate and suddenly, oh my word, we weren't planning on having this child. Later on, thank God we had that child.
Right. Well, you do know the stats that 50% of the people walking around today are a result of unplanned pregnancies.
Yeah.
Only 50% of the people in this world were planned people. The rest of us are all oopses.
Yeah.
Or pleasant surprises as we are.
That's why the good Lord made it. It's such a strong desire. I mean, sexuality. It's like security. We need security in our lives. We need social acceptance and of course sex. Those are the three biggies.
Yeah. So in any case, this so that was the first thing that was told to me. And when I told my mother I was pregnant, the first thing she said to me was, I can't raise your baby. And eventually that decompressed enough to, oh my God, what will the neighbors say? Which, considering the fact that it was 1987, really, were the neighbors really going to care that much? I don't think so. But yeah, there was a lot of shame. Definitely.
Well, James's half sister. They were Jewish people, and they ran the Jewish Community Center in Poughkeepsie, New York. And they were so embarrassed of their daughter being pregnant, they sent her down from upstate New York to a home for unwed mothers, and then they packed up their bags and left Poughkeepsie in shame because they ran the Jewish Community Center. Isn't that a shame what shame does?
Oh, yeah. So much of judgment and what we feel, what people will think of us. And I look back now and I think, and I try to, I think back to my 19-year-old self and I think, oh, you silly little fool. It might have been people might have whispered for 6 months, but after that, they would have gone on to something else and nobody would have cared. And, a year later, absolutely nobody would even consider the fact that who cared, how I got pregnant and, who my son's father was and whether or not I was married. And even my family would have gotten over it because we would have had this adorable, wonderful little child in our midst. Everybody would have gotten over it. And why I understand why I didn't have the ability to see that, but why not one single adult in my life had the ability to say, hey, what are you doing? And you don't have to do this. And
I think
nobody's
people
going to care.
Can give some pretty terrible advice, can't they?
Oh, awful advice. Awful. I do think about, I have this thing, I call it regret pie, because people will say to me, well, you made a choice. Nobody held a gun to your head. And, you did it, and you don't have the right to play a victim. And, I can acknowledge, because I was not like many of, I was not sent away to a home. I made the phone call myself to the agency. I did end up going to Massachusetts to give birth, so I did go away. I did leave, but I sent myself away, technically, to get away from my mother because she was being crazy at that point in time. There is, I can acknowledge the pieces that I played into it, but I say I will not eat the whole piece. I will not eat the whole regret pie. There are other pieces that belong to other people.
Yeah.
And like my mother gets a big slice of it. And, the other adults in my life get a slice of it. And society and the media for filling my head with, with unrealistic things also gets a slice of it. And my agency gets a big slice of it for not informing me of important things. And then my son's father gets a slice of it too. And so, everyone has a piece in this one.
Has he
I'm
been
not going to eat all their pieces.
Yeah. Has he been reconciled with his dad?
He has not. His father does know that he exists. And, honestly, the agency, I was very embarrassed by the fact that I was pregnant. And I do believe in my heart of hearts that he knew I was pregnant because, I was a little thing at that point in time. I was 110 pounds soaking wet. So believe me, I know how I carry my pregnancies. There was no way that anybody was missing it. How I hid it for 6 months, I don't know. People just told me, I thought you were getting fat. And I was like, really? But in any case, he knew I was pregnant. I think we were very much in a don't ask, don't tell. He didn't ask. I didn't tell. And, I knew that we were not going to end up, living in a little white picket house with a little house with a white picket fence. And I was embarrassed and thought that he would think I was trying to trap him, and I wasn't trying to do that, and I basically didn't want to deal with him. And my agency, on the other hand, was like, that's okay. Just write unknown on the birth certificate, and we'll put an ad in the paper. And, that's how we'll get rid of him, and we don't have to deal with it. That's how we get rid of his paternal rights. He loses his rights that way. So that is, I like to say they enabled me to do that, and I think it's definitely one of the things that they completely did that was wrong. And by the way, this practice still happens today. Fathers are considered major inconvenience to the adoption industry, and if there are ways to get rid of them, we like to get rid of their rights very quickly because they can impede the process. And, I had to go 19 years later, actually, to my son's father and say, yes, this is what happened. This is what I did. It was wrong. I am sorry. But hey, look, this is your son. So he does have pictures, and he does know that he exists. And at this point in time, it really is, the ball is in my son's court, and it needs to be, something that he wants to do when he's ready. And,
Sure.
Whenever he's ready, then we make it happen.
Now, we got to take a break again. If somebody, the computer will automatically break us off for news. If people want to do you have a book or anything, or are you just doing this as a regular citizen, or?
No, I do not have a book yet. I have a blog, a website that I've been, maintaining for a while. It's called Musings of the Lame, and it's at the URL www.adoptionbirthmothers.com. It's been on since 2005. I don't write as often as I used to because I kind of feel that I have said a lot in the past 12 years. But there's a lot of information there for anybody.
Okay. Again,
we got
to take a break. What's the website again?
It's www.adoptionbirthmothers.com.